Yeah. Does He? And how can you be sure that God will answer your prayers when you pray? So without further ado, my brother, welcome to At the Cross again.
Thanks, Corval. It's
Again.
always good to be with you.
And listen, tell us what God is laying on your heart.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks for having me, Corval. Great to be with you again.
Yes.
So our topic tonight, as Corval mentioned, does God answer your prayers? You might be surprised by my personal answer to this question, does God answer your prayers? I'd have to say He answers my prayers every single time. But I would also say that He seldom answers my prayers the exact way that I'd hoped He would. There's 4 ways that God answers prayer that I can see, biblically speaking. Number 1, the affirmative. Number 2, negative. Number 3, anticipative. And number 4, unresponsive. Or in other words, there's 4 ways God answers prayer. Yes, no, wait, or no answer. We'll talk about those in just a couple minutes. But let me just give you some background in my prayer life. I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, we visited my cousin Robbie out in the country, just outside of Regina, Saskatchewan. Robbie was a few years older than I was, and going to his house was one of the most memorable childhood experiences of my entire childhood. Robbie had a go-kart, and that was my first exposure ever to such a powerful, mini motorized vehicle. It was a powerful experience. Not only was that an incredibly fun afternoon, but I kept thinking about it for days to come. Oh, sure, I was warned about the danger of a go-kart. I'd heard the stories about hats and hair becoming entangled in the exposed engine behind the driver's seat. I'd heard stories about go-karts flipping and crushing children, but I was ready to throw caution to the wind. I was ready for a go-kart of my own. So, being from a good Christian, church-going kind of home, we said our prayers out loud every night with our parents, in the privacy of our own bedrooms. I prayed for the same thing virtually every night. I prayed for Mom and Dad. I prayed for my brothers, for my grandparents, and especially for an uncle who was struggling with bad habits and living a pretty wild life. And because we are creatures of habit, I pray basically the same prayer every night for years. And then afterwards, Mom or Dad, after they left my bedroom, I would pray my own prayers. Prayers that were maybe too private to pray in front of my parents, just my little secret. Prayers between me and God. And that's when I prayed for the go-kart. Not every night, but almost every night I prayed for the go-kart. And I never got the answer I wanted. This is something I find ironic, incredibly puzzling, really. Even though I never got a go-kart, I didn't turn my back on God. I didn't have a temper tantrum. I didn't become disillusioned. Even as a disappointed 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, I still didn't get a go-kart, and I didn't lose my desire for one. But when I was 11 and 12 years old, I started to dream and think about how I could earn money to buy a go-kart of my own. And then when I got my first paper route at age 13, I still wanted a go-kart, but I chose to save up for other things. Other stuff I wanted instead, a BMX bike, a mask and snorkel, hockey sticks, spending money for treks for junk food with my friends. It's funny how that desire for a go-kart was never fulfilled, but look, it helped create a strong work ethic in me. If you want something, work hard for it. You know what? That's not a bad thing. I suspect that's where I could have gotten into a wrong mentality with God, a lottery mentality, looking to God for a windfall, for God to do the work for me. But the other puzzling prayer that was never answered, how I wanted it, were the prayers for my uncle. We prayed every night that he would stop his wayward lifestyle and come to God. He didn't. He drank, he gambled, he became an alcoholic, he lost his house, he lost his family, he lost his health, and he died an early and unfortunate, untimely death. I believe he was in his early 50s when he passed. So now I'm his age, the age that he was when he died, and I wonder, God, why didn't you answer that prayer? Was my uncle that broken, was he that hurt that God couldn't help him, save him, help him turn it around? Which really leads to the bigger questions. Why does God allow suffering and pain and evil? Why do bad things happen to good people? You know, all the usual soul-searching questions. For me, as a young boy, and then my teen years, and then as an adult, I asked questions like, why did my uncle drink so much? Why did he gamble? Why did he lose his house and make all those choices? 30 years later, we have a much better understanding of anxiety, depression, mental illness, mood disorders, and we realize that people are hurting and sometimes making choices that they don't even understand themselves. Can't God stop that? Can't He fix it if we pray? I mean, I've seen it happen. I've seen totally impossible situations just turn right around, the worst of the worst, and then other situations, nothing happens. What about you? Does God answer your prayers? Here's the scoop. Isaiah, one of the best known prophets of Judaism and Christianity, said these words on God's behalf. He said, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Wow. God's thinking, His scope, His perspective is way out of my league. He knows stuff that I'll never know. I mean, He's balancing the whole universe. Remember that song we used to sing as kids? He's got the whole world in His hands. If He answers your prayer to win the lottery or heal your uncle, how does that balance with the rest of the world? Only God knows. If I'd gotten that go-kart when I was 8 years old, how would my life have been different? Good? Bad? Would I be a drug addict living on the streets? Would I be a corporate entrepreneur tearing up Bay Street? Would I be a kid from Arizona scoring 10 goals in the first week of the season in the NHL? Only God knows. So let's look for a moment at those 4 answers to prayer as we answer the question, does God answer your prayers? Again, he answers in these ways: affirmative, negative, anticipative, or unresponsive. Maybe you've heard some of this before. First of all, God sometimes answers in the affirmative. He answers yes to our prayers. I'm sure many of our viewers, like me, have seen God answer prayers in incredible ways, where the doctor or the lawyer said one thing, where there was no hope, where it was impossible, or the finances, or the job loss, or the relationship was a mess, but then God turned it around. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a coincidence. There was no doubt about it. It was God. And that happens. It's an amazing thing. And you know what? If you call in tonight to answer this question, does God answer your prayers? And you're calling in to share an answer to prayer, we welcome your call. But please keep your answer short and sweet, because we also want to hear from those that God answers the second way. Number 2, the negative way. Sometimes we get a negative answer to our prayers. Sometimes God offers a flat out no as his answer to our prayers. It's very difficult, especially if our prayers are just humble, unselfish, even desperate prayers, to take a no for an answer. That can leave us heartbroken, our hopes vanquished. I still remember when I heard that my uncle had passed away. My very first thought was, wow, those hundreds of prayers, maybe thousands of prayers did nothing, I thought. But now that I look back on his death 3 decades ago, I see those prayers weren't futile. Even though the answer seemed to be a no, it did something. Like the go-kart prayer. The go-kart no, the unanswered prayers for my uncle taught me how to dig in, how to wrestle through my tension, to ask meaningful questions. As Paul said to the church in Philippi, he said, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. There it is. Work out your salvation. I think maybe a lot of us are looking for a shortcut to faith, for what some have called easy believism. Can I tell you, faith that is built on a Santa Claus God who perpetually does our bidding, don't kid yourself, it's the shallowest kind of faith. Kids who have parents who never say no end up being what we call spoiled brats. People who pray and can't handle a no from God, well, they just haven't worked out their faith yet. And the next verse that's listed right after the one we just read says this: work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Check this out. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Work it out. Work out your salvation. Paul said, work it out so that God can work something in to you. Again, as those words were recorded 2,000 years ago, English hadn't been invented yet, so the earliest manuscripts we have of Paul's writings in the New Testament are Greek manuscripts. In the Greek, we know that word, ergo, to work, as in ergonomics, as in the word for work. So Paul's saying, work it out so that God can work something in. And here's the point, to fulfill his good purpose. So a no from God can make you grow. A yes answer to prayer doesn't make you work for anything. A no brings a struggle, a tension, a wrestling, an angst, even some pain. Listen, my friend, that's where God shows up. In that tension, in that pain, in that angst. That's where we can me dead with lightning. Well, nothing happened. See, there is no God. Actually, God answered such prayers a few times historically at the Red Sea, at Mount Sinai, and again on Mount Carmel. And in the end, none of the doubters believed God, and a lot of people ended up dead. So God answers in the affirmative or in the negative, but he's always going somewhere with it, always trying to work something into us. We'll talk about that more in just a minute here as we talk about how, thirdly, God answers prayer not just in the affirmative or the negative, but in the anticipative, where he says, wait. Wow. This answer can be either faith-building or faith-destroying. And it's our choice how we respond to that answer to prayer. If I pray and I don't see an answer right away, will I step into the place of God and force my way forward? Or will I wait for him? Will I be God? Or will I let him be God? I've had to ask myself this question countless times on my faith journey. Who's God here? Him or me? I'll tell you, waiting really separates the men from the boys when it comes to resilience, when it comes to determination, when it comes to patience and peace. James, the brother of Jesus, half-brother, after journeying with Jesus closely for the entirety of his life, he wrote these words. He said, "Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials and difficulties of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Allow perseverance to finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Did you hear that? God's goal in a no answer to prayer or a wait answer to prayer for whatever difficulty you're facing is to help make us mature and complete, not lacking anything. My goodness. His purpose is bigger than my shortcut to a solution. In the end, God wants me to look like his boy. He wants me to look like Jesus. Check out these verses. Paul said in Romans, "We know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called to his will, his plan." Because people that God has had his hand on, he had also predetermined their destination to be transformed into looking like his son. Hello. God's plan for you isn't just a place. It's not a geography or a thing. God's plan, his destination for you, is a person. Listen, no matter what you pray, In the end, God's plan is He wants to help you look just like His Son Jesus. He wants you to be full of love. He wants you to be filled with joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and humility. He wants you to have the full character of His Son Jesus. And I'll tell you straight up, God answering yes to every prayer you offer doesn't make you like Jesus. It could actually make you spoiled. So, in answering the question, does God answer your prayers? We see the first three He answers in the affirmative, or the negative, or the anticipative, and now fourthly, unresponsive. This might be the toughest one. When there's just not an answer at all. Like, does God even exist? Does He care? God, are you even there? These are huge and difficult questions. But let me touch on the unresponsive answer to prayers. In the biblical book of Habakkuk, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's considered a minor prophet in the Old Testament. Habakkuk, the prophet, asked God this question. He asked, "How long, O Lord, will I call for help and you will not hear?" And very similar to that, the prophet Isaiah said these words. He said, "Your sins are the roadblock between you and God. That's why He doesn't answer your prayers or let you see His face." I'll tell you, sometimes in the Old Testament context, God doesn't hear. It's a metaphor. I mean, is that even possible for God not to hear? Theologically, God sees all, He knows all, He hears all, He's everywhere present, He's all powerful. It's not that He doesn't actually hear us. It's just that there's separation. He chooses sometimes not to respond. And I left the unresponsive point until last because this is the most difficult one to hear. Maybe a part of the reason we're not hearing from God is because it's our issue. We've, as Isaiah said, separated ourselves from God, from His life-giving presence. Like I said last month on At the Cross Live, scuba divers need their oxygen tanks. To swim away from their tanks, to swim away from that source of life means death. Jesus is life. To separate ourselves from God, even to live independently, has consequence. It leads to death, abandonment, isolation, or at least it feels like it. So when God is unresponsive, the divine, can I call it this? The divine game of cat and mouse or hide and seek comes into play. Author Graham Cook asks, why is God hiding? Is it normal? Is it because we've done something wrong? Good question. God journeys with us both in hiddenness, or biblically that's a theme of wilderness, as well as God showing up in His full-on presence, in His manifest presence, in answers to prayer as He prospers and blesses us. The book of Job spoke of this hiddenness. From where then does wisdom come? And where is the place of understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all living. There's something about that hiddenness. There's something about the quiet seasons, the desert seasons, the seasons in the wilderness, the seasons of isolation. where God's working something. Answers to prayer are a time of blessing. Hiddenness is a time of building. Graham Cook also said, if you don't understand the beauty of hiddenness, you can feel disoriented and discouraged. He goes on to say, regardless of our emotions, in hiddenness, we learn to be at rest, assured that God is just as fully present in our faith as he is on the days when he's present in our feelings. Does God answer your prayers? Here's my follow-up question for you. Seriously. Does God answer your prayers? And if he doesn't answer your prayers, are you taking your ball and going home? Or are you actually willing to trust him? You can only find peace in life when you make peace with God. Tonight I want to encourage you to be at peace. No matter what answer comes for your prayers, yes, no, wait, or if you just don't hear anything from God, be at peace. Find rest. Stop trying to figure it all out and put your faith and trust in God. Whether your prayers are answered or not, put your hope in God. He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous fall. You know in your heart that God is real, and you sense his love, don't you? I want to encourage you tonight, just trust him. It's been my honor to share some thoughts with you tonight. Bless you.